welcome everyone. Forgive us for starting a couple minutes late here. We've got some technical difficulties on our end, but that's what makes it fun. That's what makes it exciting. It's never boring to do these. No. With no further ado, I should say right off the top here, let me introduce you to Liza Cunningham, who has very kindly joined us this week at the last minute, I might add. We contacted Liza, I think, on Wednesday. Liza, you had training with us, I think, on Wednesday. And I spoke with our trainer, Miguel, shortly after that. And he said, I just trained like this incredible person, Liza, you should like get in touch with her. And it's like, oh, do you think she'd be willing to come on a stream with us? And sure enough, like we contacted her, and not only was she willing, but she was willing to do it 2 days later. So an infinite, like huge thank you to you.
Anyone about lasers anytime.
That's how I feel too. I mean, we might have a job for you then.
Yeah.
We'll tell you, why don't you introduce yourself? As everyone's joining in the chat, I'll say we're so happy you could join us this week. Hopefully James will be able to join us here in a little bit too. But, please say hello. Let us know where you're watching from. We're so happy to have you. I mean, Liza, take it away. Tell us about, a little bit about you.
Okay. Well, I'm British, you might have noticed. I've been in Canada, in Vancouver about 5 years. I haven't really seen that much else of Canada yet, but I'm hoping once all this situation is sorted out, then we'll be able to do that. I'm an artist, but I also really love photography. But I worked as a graphic designer for many years. I won't say how many, but many studios across Europe. So I was basically in Liverpool, London, Berlin, and then I used to have to hop to different places all the time to do graphic design projects, web design projects. And so although I've got that sort of fine art sensibility, I am also very fond of a deadline. I'm, quite disciplined in that way. So
I understand.
And then I used to teach in university, and then also basically in art galleries too, which is another passion of mine. And that circuitous route has brought me to Mulgrave School, where I now work as the art and design studio manager.
Very cool.
I'm super techie, so I'm really interested in working with traditional studio practice, but also big fan of technology and bringing that in. So that's basically why I'm sitting here talking to you, I think, today.
Well, I'm so excited. I mean, as like a ground floor for the discussion, I will say, so my background is principally in advertising agencies. And I so identify with that combination of like creative, but also loving a deadline, because it's sort of fundamental to that whole industry where it's infinitely creative right up until, hey, we have to present this in about 2 days. Like, we really better scrape something together.
Usually as a fine artist, you sort of set your own based on your requests and based on, schedules for like a gallery show or something. But a fast-paced environment, I really thrive in that. I did freelance for a while, and although I love going into different studios to do freelance and working with clients, the being at home working on your own parts didn't really fit I'm a bit too social for that. So I
understand.
This school, so I love being here.
That's excellent. I have to ask then, this is a question for me maybe, but I should mention too, if at any point you have a question for Liza, absolutely throw it in the chat. Again, we're so happy to have you all with us here today. We've got some great images from Liza that we're going to get through in just a moment. But I wanted to ask then, as somebody with a fine arts background, so first and foremost, you mentioned that you were fond of traditional studio practice. So if somebody hasn't heard that term before, what sort of things would sort of, just in a blanket sort of way, like what would that sort of cover off? It's just, to you.
Yeah, so 2D or 3D work. So 2D would probably encompass painting, and here's my son, wants to say hi.
Hello, how are you?
It's spring break.
Hey, it's a family show.
So 2D work would be probably painting, so either with oil or with acrylic, using inks, printmaking, using intaglio, collograph, all sorts of different types of processes for that. Multimedia, so you've got like sort of collage and everything like that. And then sculptural work. In the past, I've really enjoyed working with oil clay. So that's one of my favorite mediums. I think you might have a couple of images of those.
Definitely,
And,
yeah.
Yeah, and then really building up with oil clay, but also the subtractive sort of processes of actually chipping things away to form an image as well, or form like a 3D image.
Very cool. I was gonna say, it's so we were sort of talking about this off air before we started, but like very reminiscent of the laser, right? There is a certain something that's sculptural about the laser. But I have to ask, because a lot of the people who tune into these are also very like creative individuals, and you were sort of talking about creativity and imposing sort of self restrictions or sort of guidelines for your own creativity. And so I'm curious, as somebody who's clearly seasoned in a lot of different mediums, and I mean, also in the tech world, like tech design tools and stuff give you a lot of access to, I mean, things you could never dream of doing with some of the more traditional media, and vice versa, of course. But I'm curious where you think sort of restriction falls into that, because one of the best pieces of advice I think I ever got as an early sort of creative person was to try and limit your creativity if you want to produce, to sort of give yourself a rigid set of rules you have to stay within. Because if you can just sort of mess with something forever, you might never finish it, kind of thing. Sometimes it's tough, I think, for artistic people to say, like, this is done. Like I can walk away from this and feel good about it.
Yeah.
So sort of, how do you draw those boxes when you have something as powerful as like a laser or Photoshop or Illustrator in your sort of toolkit? Like, how do you sort of define those parameters? What do you like best about using a laser?
I think you develop your own visual language. So there are motifs and things that you subconsciously.
Oh, I think I lost audio.
Your creativity. So things like a certain quality of light, or something like the way that shadow makes a pattern. Things like that, as well as sort of cultural influences, obviously, as well. Everybody is going to bring their own experience, their lived experience to bear. So I feel like an art education really sort of fine tunes that for you. And, it really develops that sense of, you develop a sense of self through visual arts. And I feel it's therapeutic, but it's also, it's very challenging because you are questioning yourself all the time. However, I'm in an educational environment here, so I get to play outside of my own creative sort of outlet. I get to demonstrate a range of techniques. I get to work with what the students are bringing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not telling them what to make. I'm showing them and demonstrating the different materials and some of the processes, which can be very, technical and very difficult. And the students really rise to the challenge. They really sort of push themselves to try and take what I'm telling them and sort of, relate it to their own experience and what they want to say.
Sure. I mean, we've said this before. I mean, you guys can check the tapes. It's on our YouTube channel. You can see we've been consistent in this forever. But one of the most impressive things I think about working at Trotec has been we frequently have students come in for internships and sort of work co-ops and things of that nature, where we sort of allow them to, we do try and tailor it around whatever it is that they want to study. So if they have an interest in illustration, architecture, whatever it might be, but the level of work that like a high school student is capable of is so far and above beyond whatever you assume, heading into working with someone, particularly a creative young person. They will consistently, every time, they have blown me away. And I've always said that it's not about sort of blowing smoke or trying to be overly complimentary. It is consistent that there's something I think about, at least for us here at Trotec, we're this close to the laser every day, and we sort of stop seeing it with fresh eyes, I think, sometimes. And it can be so refreshing creatively to have somebody come in who doesn't get that opportunity every day and sort of challenges you with, well, could we do this? So going like, well, yeah, I guess like we probably couldn't we? And it opens doors, right?
Overthink these things. You can watch videos, you can do tutorials, you can sort of know too much about the materials and the processes and think, I know resistant materials. I know how this is going to work with this. I can predict this. But, let's not, let's not have that restrict us. I understand that alcohol is not a great medium to use with acrylic, but I've used it and it works because basically sort of say these are the rules and this is how I'm going to circumvent the rules because I'm an artist and I'm allowed. So, alcohol ink with resin on cut acrylic works really well. It does have those little micro fractures when you use it and engraved, but that shouldn't be enough to like put you off trying things. We have an amazing art studio here with all sorts of different materials. And the nice thing is it's a box, a sand pit with all of these different things in, and there are ultimately so many different combinations that you can make that it's just your own imagination really. And
100%.
Students aren't restricted by fear, which can creep in when you're older with a lot of creative people.
Of course.
And so it's sort of it's nice to see that. It's refreshing and it's a really nice environment for me to be in too.
Well, and I will say I could not agree with you more. I think sort of along that line too, there's an aspect of I think when you're young and you perhaps have less of a sense of the history of a particular art style as well, it can be helpful because you don't come with that baggage of sort of so I'm a hobbyist musician, like just for fun in my off time. I love to play music, and writing music when you have a big or bigger knowledge of music becomes, I think, in a way, at least for certain people, more difficult because you can sort of put a damper on your own creativity, say, oh, this is just too much or I feel like I've heard this, before, or this is too much. So, as a painter or a sculptor or those things, particularly being fine arts trained, you have so much respect for obviously those who come before you that there's also I think part of breaking the rules is just to hopefully sometimes just find something novel and something new and interesting that you can do right with the medium that, I've seen wood cut 80 different ways on a laser, but it took until a student came in to sort of show me I remember one particular student who did this really cool thing with the way they were like charring the wood and then using the side of the wood as almost like a marker, using the char against the rest of the wood. And I started like, oh, that's really, really cool. I would have never thought to, in my mind, it's like the char is like, no, like you want to avoid the char.
A mistake. You could view that as a mistake. You could train yourself into thinking that,
Right.
You don't want to be in that sort of like sphere where I'm not producing something for a client here who wants a sign for their wall with their logo on it. This is a piece of art. You come to it with a completely different sensibility, really. I mean, I'm a real art history nerd, so I would say that, having a good grounding in art history is super important. And that's what we ask the students to sort of, engage with as well.
Sure.
But there is that thing of having an inner critic. And, this is an IB school, and one of their learner profiles is all about risk taking and about creative and, taking those creative risks, not jumping off a building risk taking, but the everyday sort of, this is a bit scary. I'm going to feel that fear. I'm going to do it anyway, just to see what happens. I'm not going to worry about getting a bad mark for it because it's more about the process,
Yes.
And within the process, you could come up with something amazing or something that you'll learn for next time. So, I think that's the nice sensibility that we're working with here.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, with that in mind, if it's all right with you, I'd love to share this this presentation that you sent us. So this encompasses a lot of the work that you've done, like with students and with teachers at Mulgrave. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. We've had a laser for about a year and a half. I've been here for 2 years, and so I pitched to get a laser in the first place because we have a really well-stocked design department, and we have an amazing array of materials and different machinery for fine art as well. But the two departments now, that this wing has just been built in the last couple of years, and they're right next to each other. So I'm a big advocate of the artists using the design tools and vice versa.
100%.
Yeah. So yes, these are some of the examples of some of the work that they've done, over the past year and a bit, basically. This one here is, if you skip onto the next slide, it's a sort of more close up here. These were circular forms which were suspended like a mobile. So they were thinking about Alexander Calder and sort of, kinetic art. It was in a dark space, and so the artist wanted to have this the idea of like a shiny reflective surface that they were projecting on, and then as the form moved, it would actually send the projections around the space. So that worked out really nicely. And the material itself is like a joy to work with. I know it's difficult sometimes to try and get people to understand that you have to work in reverse if you're working on a mirror.
Yes.
You don't want the lasers peering everywhere. And so the piece that she wanted to make was actually larger than our laser bed would allow. So we made it in 2 halves. And then instead of just having a straight line down the center, we actually followed the curve of one of the drawings. So it was like much more of an organic form.
Yeah, you can see it. I think this is it here.
Yeah, I've got one on the wall. Actually, I do have it here.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So this organic form here is, you follow this line. Why do you have to have a straight line if it doesn't fit on the bed? And then we took the opportunity to do it in a couple of different materials as well, but both like a mirror finish. So yeah, it's
gorgeous. It came out beautifully. I have to say, I know that a lot of the people who will tune into our streams are business people, right? I mean, they certainly are creative. I have no doubt about that. But it's a question of, a lot of their work, as you sort of said, is for clients. I encourage all of them, and I will say it again here. If you take away anything from the stream today, please let it be that as much as you can, or whenever you can, try and make a little bit of time for yourself just to experiment and play with the laser. You don't have to consider yourself an artist, but just to expand your sort of visual language, as you were talking about before, to expand those things that you have to draw upon. If you get the opportunity with scraps around your shop or whatever it might be, for 10 minutes, even just to sort of play with something, because you might, kickstart inspiration for yourself for your next, 10 years of making signs, or you might inspire a new product idea, whatever it is, just by sort of fooling around, right?
That's it. If you do have time to experiment, you should go for it, because, these images were created by, starting off with sketches in pen. This student wasn't adept at using Illustrator or anything like that, and she didn't want that sort of like very specific, very, draftsmanship sort of line. She wanted an organic feel. And, I really like the contrast between, something that's cut out in such a beautiful, very crisp shape, but has that organic feel of just like a sketch. And also, you can try engraving on the front and engraving on the back, doing an infill, all of those types of things, but without worrying about what a client would want. You have that sort of in your arsenal then to offer the clients. And then this is just a way of, it's something else that you could potentially offer to people. People need art in the workplace. They need something that, maybe isn't on the wall. Maybe it's inhabiting another type of space. Maybe it moves, that type of thing.
I think it's that kind of thinking that can be helpful in the long run, right? That's sort of out of the, I hate to use that hackneyed phrase, but you know what I mean? That sort of out of the box kind of, just trying not to allow yourself to get into a sort of ritual of thinking every single time when you approach a new project necessarily, which is, it's hard. Don't get me wrong. I struggle with it all the time. We're constantly making new things here, but it can be tough to stay inspired. That's why I love doing these streams so much, because seeing other people be creative, like, this is fantastic. I've so rarely gotten to do something that has this sort of organic, as you said, sort of like a sketch. You can really sense the sort of human aspect of it coming through in a way, right? Despite the fact that it's done with, high tech in a way that that's gorgeous.
Yeah, exactly.
Here, I'll.
Okay, here's another couple of examples of work that students have done. The one on the right was actually a print piece which the student cut up in Illustrator, and then we cut an SVG of the same image, and then we just cut those out on acrylic. And so when she applied the print to the back of the acrylic, then she hung them all up with lots of different monofilament. When you move around, you actually get to the front, you see the whole image, but when you move to the side, there's like a fractured version of it.
That's so cool.
piece was all about, sort of how people see you and, sort of self, the way that people present themselves to the world as well.
Sure.
And, yeah, the piece at the top was an experimentation with alcohol inks, and then the one at the bottom again was another sketch, which we actually used rub and buff. Do you know what that is? It's like a thing
No.
put onto frames, like to gild frames.
Okay.
But it comes in different colors, and so it's basically like a carnauba wax and pigment sort of thing that you can sort of rub into the lines, and then you can polish it off onto the surfaces. So that's quite nice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I have to say, so this is one of my favorite slides. This piece on the right, I think, absolutely, to your point, starts to interrogate some of those kind of questions of self and identity that we were talking about in the beginning. But I cannot get over that the sketch on the bottom left there is really, really incredible. Like that's
yeah.
When I went to art school, they had us draw our own skeletons, and it took me ages, and I don't think it was anywhere near the quality of this.
The thing is that students are cranking these things out, and you can then take them in different directions. Something that's pulled from a sketchbook, you can then take it into like a print, or you could take it into the basis of a painting. And here she's decided to take it into a different medium altogether. There are other things you can do, like produce that type of thing and backlight it, or make like a huge version of it, cut it into sections and put it together. Excuse me. Yeah. Here are some other tests that students have done. There's one on the right is all about layering. And then, there's the student on the left. We were talking about charring, and like you were saying about, normally I would want to sand that off probably, the charring around the edges, but she actually really liked it and saw it as like, part of the process of, decay, which she was actually looking at in terms of like the flowers that she was drawing.
Sure.
And then, yeah.
This is wonderful. I love particularly the one on the right. We've been doing a lot of, in the Rayjet Challenge, we've done a few different shadow boxes or images like this with the multiple layers of. It's one of the things I think the laser does best. I love the bright and vivid colors, though. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and it's really nice because I tend to buy a lot of. Actually, I've been buying Trotec materials. That's how I came across, the laser company in the first place.
Sure.
I was looking for a material supplier, and I really love the fact that you can get beautiful colors that are not just the primary colors. You can have these like satin effects, translucency, various levels. That's just it's another medium for us, and to have that range of color and to be able to talk about the color wheel and to talk about how different things work with optics. All of that type of stuff is really useful if you've got all of these different levels of transparency and translucency to work with.
I appreciate your saying that. That's why acrylic tends to be my favorite of all of our materials. Not that I pick favorites, but we do. The thing is that what I love about acrylic is it's so pure in a way that it's this sort of material would be just one color all the way through. It's a solid. I mean, in this case, it's like this solid, beautiful neon green. But I think, again, sort of to what we were discussing earlier, that restriction of, it doesn't change color. It's essentially just like a building block, and from it you can make whatever you like. Watching those flat kind of colored blocks essentially become sculptures or images like this never ceases to be like, oh, that's so cool.
You've got something that's flat and you're making it dimensional, and that's how you're bringing in shade and tone.
Right.
So there's all sorts of different levels, and of course you could come along and you can hand paint that as well, or you could actually another look to it.
Well, and to that point too, I was going to say, like, I think even this image on the right is a great example again of how you can take, because I mention it because it's something that I struggled with initially, which was this sort of idea of how do you take what is typically thought of, I think, as like a 2D plane, right, and make it into something that's a little bit more, as you say, dimensional, right? Give it some volume and give it some depth. And these are, this is 3 different ways in one piece one slide, of sort of showing, there's infinite ways you can do that if you want to experiment.
Well, artists have always always work with the picture plane to give an impression of dimensionality. You know,
Right.
we've got this space in real life, and you know, use things like perspective to create something from a 2D plane. So it's sort of like, it's not a very difficult jump to start thinking in between 2D and 3D and start looking at a 2D object and thinking it doesn't have to stay flat, you know.
100%.
And then of course you can come along and you can start layering things up. You can start messing with the acrylic, messing with the substrates. Like here,
And I hope you will, for the record. I hope you will. Please do. Please do, and then tag us and let us know, because again, we tend to be a bit too close to it sometimes here, and you know, we always stray towards wanting to ward people off from being too, you know, obviously, you know, never venture into an area that would be unsafe, of course, but like, you know, stuff like this where you're warping or causing the acrylic to run or anything like that, like, oh my gosh, like, please do it. Please do it. I'm never going to be able to say, you know, on camera, let's say, that you should do that, but like please do it. Like, between us around here, please do it.
I can say it because I'm a Trotec, so it's okay.
Right. Thank you.
You're allowed.
This is a gorgeous piece, by the way. Is this done with paint, or is this the acrylic itself that's running, or is this a?
No, acrylic with some alcohol ink, and the acrylic is inlaid and it's transparent. So then you get that sort of light effect behind. The one on the left is spray paint, and the one below that is just, you know, taking some of that more neon stuff and layering it up. So yeah, the same sort of image was just used just to, like, as an experiment, basically, to see, you know, to push the very sort of slick lines that you expect from, you know, something that's like sort of flame polished laser cut, and then just messing with it.
Yep. Oh, I love this. This is so important, because again, every day it's like, you know, what you're looking for is that perfect flame polished edge and that perfect crisp vector with no extra, you know, like points or anything in it. So I think I prefer this, to be honest.
Maybe you're not. Maybe one day you get up and say, hey, actually, I'm going to know the rules, and then I'm going to, you know, mess with them, because that's what
exactly. I know you think you want your sign to say Sobeys, but what if, stick with me, it were dripping down the sign?
Might be a hard sell. Might be.
I mean, worth it though, worth it.
Yeah, this is just to demonstrate that we've actually used the laser quite a lot, just for making things like signage for around the school. Like, we've used things like this for when teachers go and do a presentation or something to the students, to say, you know, oh, you're in grade 10, might not choose to do art because they get to choose different pathways. Or, you know, if we've got a fair where we're trying to get students to come along and say, oh, let's, you know, sign up as an art assistant. It's basically cleaning the brushes a lot, but hey, it looks really cool, doesn't it?
It looks really cool.
Yeah.
I think that alone is enough of a reason to do something. I think just because it looks cool is more than enough of a reason to want to make something or do something or try something.
Well, I mean, the very fact that we didn't have time to make a stand or something for that, and we ended up using the mannequins that we use for drawing practice, you know, it made me think, well, you know, maybe I'm not going to make a very slick stand for something next time. Maybe I'm going to use a palette, and instead of creating legs for it, I'm just going to stick some brushes to the back, and that is going to hold itself. So it's a bit more elegant in terms of the materials that you're using, because it's in and of itself. So. Slight
tip from us though, and maybe Liza will disagree with me here, but I mean, you can tell me once it's done and it's worked and you're sort of like, oh, that worked. If somebody asks you like, oh, did you plan this from the start? Yes, always yes. This is exactly what I had in mind. This wasn't as a result of, did you know that would work with the mannequins? Absolutely. 100%. All up here. I had it.
I know exactly what's going to happen the whole time.
I didn't use the word visionary, but you can if you want to. It's totally fine. I'll accept that on my business card. Oh, this is cool.
Example of taking something that's, you know, a beautiful shape, and then making it sort of more of an abject thing, if you know that term from art history.
Sure.
Excuse me. You know, the moth apocalypse that we had? I don't know if you had that, but it was
I do. In the city I grew up in, we had a grasshopper apocalypse, certainly. They are very moth-like, aren't they?
At school. I think it was all over Vancouver. It was actually very beautiful. I remember going and seeing this like floodlight on the stadium, and it just had all of these moths just dancing around, and it was mesmerizing.
Cool.
Anyway, a bit scary as well. So
Sure.
the student was wanting to explore that. So she was taking things like the shapes that we cut out and just repeating them, and using repetition and doing multiples is another sort of staple of creating art. And she used acrylic inks, stuck on like bits of fluff, bits of hair, little bits of some other things that you really wouldn't want on your piece, but put them on purpose. And then hung it up basically, and then we lit it, and
they've really perhaps this is silly, but I feel as though there's something about, particularly in the close-ups on left here, there's something really, like, you've really captured something about moths, that sort of weird combination between like they're beautiful but also like kind of like icky. Do you know what I mean? Kind of like you wouldn't necessarily, but they are cool.
No, definitely. I think she'd be very pleased with that comment. That's exactly what she was going for. And also,
it succeeded.
It's sort of semi-abstract too. I mean, none of those shapes are an actual moth. They're
Sure.
sort of like shapes. So you don't have to go super literal with what you're doing either.
And as you said, variations on a motif, right? Like very classic in terms of.
Yeah, she designed like 3 shapes, and then we just cut them in different sizes. It was so quick. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, this is another of our grade 12 students. They're actually just having an exhibition at the moment, and created an architectural piece. The horizontal layers are all laser cut acrylic, and then it's spray painted. So he was a bit worried about, being able to see the glue and that type of thing. So he basically used thicker glue, because we have Weld on 4 and other things like that, but we have to use it in a well-ventilated space. Obviously, CA glue has that horrible blooming. So he used a thicker glue and then spray painted the whole thing. And then to then bring it to life, we put it in an installation environment, which is actually in our film studio downstairs. And threw a projector on it. We had imagery running. So it was actually, a very beautiful and mesmerizing thing to look at. And a 3D thing that you could walk all the way around on the plinth.
Absolutely. Well, and it's so interesting too to me that like the image that's in sort of the top left, like at 10 o'clock, and the one here that takes up the right of the frame are almost from the same angle, but because of just the slight shift in lighting and the slight shift in perspective, and then the change in sort of, as you say, like the color of the lighting, it looks entirely, it gives an entirely different feeling, right? Like this is what I was saying too in the beginning. The fact that this is a grade 12 student just makes me feel as though I've done nothing with my life. Like, this is incredible. This is unbelievable. Oh man. That's so great. That's so inspiring.
Like electrical cables. I really like the idea of having this very structured thing that's been designed in Illustrator and then, sent out to the laser, but then putting it together with found objects. And
100%. I love too the sort of the contrast, not to get too art education, I suppose, but the contrast that exists, I think, between the sort of the rigid structures of the buildings and then the flowing lines of the sort of walkways that pass between them, I think is sort of a nice like contrast. The way that it's not it's certainly not the way that you would expect to see sort of a walkway or a bridge between. I'm not certain that it's even meant to be, if it's more something that's being implied, but it's so cool.
And a good piece of artwork, there's a school of thought that says that a good piece of artwork isn't really finished until the viewer's interacting with it, because you are bringing your lived experience to it. And so you are, you're basically sort of looking at that. It's going to remind you of something. It's going to trigger these things. So we're not telling you what this thing is that you're looking at. You're actually, part of the piece, because you're going to bring something to it from your own experience.
Right.
It's
that makes sense.
Sort of clash of things.
I could not agree more, Doug, by the way. That is unreal.
Yes.
I hope so much too, as I say, that even if you're watching, you have a laser and you use it principally for commercial use, I hope this inspires you. I hope this is so exciting because, again, like, even if you're doing it for commercial use, I hope at some point using the laser should be fun. I mean, it's the same as any other creative tool, and I hope you get to sort of enjoy getting to experiment, or if anything, I hope this inspires you because, I mean, clearly there are people out there, your students are doing unbelievable stuff. That's so cool.
I think that having those tools available, you know, they're seeing the potential and they want to run with it. Here's an example that one of the other grade 12 students did, and he really wanted to have this sort of the look of a very organic sort of painterly artist sort of hand on the painting with his abstract canvas, and then he wanted to then overlay this with the bright pops of color. And a lot of his work is all about identity and about layering. And so he was very excited to be able to do this. And he, we actually used the acrylic bender, you know, to thermoform sort of the pieces at the top, so they would sit behind the canvas and screw them on. You know, it was a really great problem to solve in terms of like what he wanted to do and how he was going to realize it.
So cool. I have to say too, the one that stands out to me, I think as an overall piece, it really succeeds, but then also the sort of added dimension that you get of the light through the colored acrylic onto the canvas creates sort of even like a third form now that, you know, it exists as the abstract canvas, it exists as the sort of 3D piece that's suspended. And then there's sort of this cool world where they interact and mesh on the canvas through light. And it's really cool. Oh,
yes,
man.
And he this as being something that you would install in a very sunny area so that it would change throughout the day. You know, almost
Yes.
like a note from a sundial. You know, you'd be able to see the passage of time through where the pieces are interacting. So it's sort of like a big thing. Yeah.
Is it 2 oranges past pink already? Oh, this is so I'd missed I'd missed this in the beginning. Are these butterflies emerging from inside of the?
Yes.
Oh,
We
that's
had
cool.
lots of butterfly motifs this year. It's the moths coming to get us. So this is actually a ceramic piece. So it's bisqueware ceramic. We have a kiln here. A lot of the time, actually, I sort of equate the laser to the kiln in terms of, you know, the way that we use it.
Okay.
Students don't have hands-on in terms of like pressing the button for the laser to go, but I do that. But they prepare everything. They understand the whole process. They understand what's needed. You know, for something like the kiln, you can't put a thick piece of ceramic like clay into the kiln. It will explode. You know, you can't put in PVC into the laser. You know, there are things safety things that you need to understand in order to be able to create. So it's one of those things where it's an exciting thing to be able to offer, basically. And then these combinations, you know, the very sort of organic touch of the clay and the very matte surface with the contrast of the you know, the transparent edges and the light coming through, you know, it's a really lovely contrast.
100%.
All right.
I can't get over it, man. This is one of my favorite things about this job, getting to see the incredible stuff. I just finished this morning writing a letter that's going to go out to a lot of our customers that talks about how, I mean, we're consistently impressed by the work that people do with our lasers, and it's not fluff. I no joke. Again, we could never conceive of the things that I think people will take our lasers and do. And I guess in my head, I sort of equate it to the opposite of that sort of art history question we were talking about before, that, you know, one of the greatest strengths, I think, of having a thorough knowledge of art history, or, you know, a knowledge of some of the artists who inspire you or came before you, is then being able to build on, hopefully, the experiments that they did, right? To sort of take, you know, where their ideas, you know, the sort of ideas that they presented, I guess, and run with them to some degree. And man.
Yeah, I mean, here's collage. Collage is something that's been used, you know, for decades. And, you know, the student is doing it, but then they're adding another layer to it. You know, the contrast of putting these letters on, I don't even know if you can see them in that image, but you know, she wanted them to be there, but at the same time to not be in your face. Like, for instance, the logo behind you, you know, that's designed so you can see it from the other side of the room. It's designed to be legible. This isn't. This is designed to draw you in. It's designed for you to have this interface with the work where you're actually having this sort of intimate relationship with the piece. You're invited to look at it, to spend time with it, to like see what's in there. You know, the images and the text reveal themselves to you slowly over time. This is the type of thing that, you know, it's a slightly different sensibility to creating commercial work.
100%. When I first saw this, I didn't realize that the letters were 3D. I assumed that they had been printed and then, I suppose, very precisely cut out. But in looking at it, you can see just the very faint hints of the shadow that exists because of the. Here I am pointing at my screen as though people can. You can see the faint hints of shadow and stuff that are created by the 3D letters. That's so cool. Oh my gosh!
I really like the fact without any sort of like masking tape as well. You know, they've been hand applied. She's not bothered about them being completely straight or to have the letter spacing or the kerning. You know,
sure.
That's not something that's. This is a piece that, again, this is taking the idea of using the strip heater to bend the acrylic, because obviously you can thermoform it, but taking it to extremes where you're actually creating bubbles and you are molding something in a sculptural way, in a safe way as well. You know, obviously he was heating these things up and then pressing down on the table. And then taking these pieces and then putting them together with other materials like wire mesh and creating a light fitting out of it, which is then suspended as an installation.
So
and then
cool.
I don't know if you can see the little striations on there as well. They're, you know,
like
very
through that run through the acrylic.
Yeah. So he created these very precise lines first, and then decided to make this sculptural form. So you still see them, but you see them as sort of undulating and flowing, like, you know, something more organic.
Absolutely. You sort of take it again. It's adding form in another unique way. This is so cool.
Yeah.
Oh man. So would this be suspended like this with the light at the base, or would it be suspended sort of up, like inverted from when we?
Yeah, it's suspended from above, so you can walk all the way around it in a dark space.
So cool. Oh, I loved these. Okay, please tell me all about these.
Okay, so this is one of the students' personal projects. In the IB continuum, students in grade 10 actually create a personal project due to their own interests. And this student wanted to create some prints to send to seniors, and you know, he wanted to make things to make people happy, basically. So he created these really sweet little drawings of animals, and then he wanted to make a lot of prints out of them. So what we did was we transferred his drawings to acrylic, and then we used that. So you can see there, the dog there still has the masking on, so he had to take the mask off. We did the next one without masking, I might add. That was a pain, taking that off. Anyway, we use the intaglio machine. I don't know if you know, it's like a big printmaking press.
Okay.
So you can make things like this type of thing. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, sure.
Like a sort of engraving, right?
Like almost like a woodcut, almost.
Yeah, it is. It's a cut, but it's actually a cut that you usually use traditionally in copper. You can also use it in acrylic. So
cool.
Instead of engraving it by hand, he actually used the drawing that he did in pencil, and we used that as the engraving plate. You know, we just engraved it onto the acrylic, and then he put it through the intaglio press and made so many different prints from it. So you can see there, you can see the plate that has the ink. It's like an oil-based ink that goes into the grooves. You sort of move it around and you take a lot of it off. If you want to, you can leave areas, and you can sort of make areas lighter by removing more of the surface. And then you just put it through the roller basically, and make your prints. And then you can, once they're dry, you can color them with tints, watercolor, inks, whatever you like.
Well,
so
and that's
a lot of these.
It seems like a natural fit for the laser, but I don't know that
Yeah.
I've ever seen somebody make like stamp plates, but of course it makes sense.
Well, I just thought this is something that we have here, and this is something that we have here, and let's see if they work together. And yeah, they came out really well. So I'm definitely going to be exploring that more as well.
Sure. I mean, I know obviously like people, the company was founded based on like by a stamp maker, but it's rare that I get to see somebody who I don't know that I've ever seen somebody use it to make like what is essentially like say like a it's almost like a woodblock print or it's so cool. They work to make you happy, by the way. It's working on me at least.
Yeah, you can make with the roller, it's just like a heavy roller and you pass it through. You can make collagraphs with different layers of texture as well. So you can actually raise the roller up. So if you wanted to make like a layered piece, you could actually start working with that as well and throwing in, you know, found objects and things like that too.
Sure. Or like you say, almost like the Japanese woodblock prints where you do like each plate has a different section of the image. And so all of your, you know, blue perhaps is on one and then all of your next colors on the next. And
yeah.
Oh, it's so cool. I should speed up. Forgive me, I'm going too slowly. I have to ask about this one though, because when I saw it on the cover of the presentation, I said, like, I need to know more about this. What is the matches one?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, using unusual materials and bringing them together is, you know, sort of like an artistic staple, isn't it? So
Sure.
The artist here wanted to create something wearable. So this is actually the beginning of creating a corset. So
Cool.
I introduced her to, you know, Liza and, you know, the different materials. And we talked about how she would join pieces together. So obviously we explored things like, you know, kerf cutting to make things flexible,
Sure.
in sort of doing finger joints, all that type of stuff. But she really wanted to do something that was more rigid. So it was like a sort of restrictive corset. So then we ended up using holes and then stitching them together. So yeah, if you go on to the next slide, you can see the finished one. So then
cool.
you can put this on and wear it. And then she added the matches because she wanted it to be like a commentary, like a feminist commentary about, you know, being easily enraged and, you know, being having like sort of inflammatory remarks and, you know, sort of being, you know, those types of things.
Hell hath no fury kind of thing.
Pardon?
Hell hath no fury, sort of a. That's great.
I wouldn't want to set this off, definitely.
No.
But it's, yeah. I mean, she's a very talented fashion designer anyway, but she, you know, this was definitely a new medium. And so I'm actually quite excited about the laser leather thing that you've been discussing recently, because I feel like that's something that we can offer.
100%. I appreciate you mentioning that. There'll be some information going out today, actually, all about it. So if anybody's interested, I don't want to derail the present. I think this is so cool, but engraving-supplies.ca, it's now available, laser leather. Until the end of the month, it's actually a little bit cheaper than it will be in the coming months. We've got sort of like an early bird price. So feel free to check it out. It's a very cool two-toned material, completely laser safe. I mean, obviously. Yeah, I hope you'll check it out.
That's, you know, obviously students are interested in doing, you know, exploring fabrics and things too. So we've worked with leather fabric, but not, you know, the idea that you can laser a different color underneath, I think it's going to be quite exciting for people. So just quickly going through these, this is an elective that I run where we make things for the school. So it's sort of giving back. So what it is students go and interview the librarians and they come up with ideas for making a genre sign for the library.
Oh, cool.
So it's going to be something that they library, it's going to help with people finding the sort of materials that they want, but also it's a really fun way of using, you know, different aspects of creating signage and the, you know, using this sort of like hand-drawn fonts and things like that. It's really fun.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh man, isn't that incredible too? Like this is, I feel like the difference between these two slides. Oh. Like, I feel like that is a summation of everything we've talked about today, where it's like the fact
Well,
that you can use
we're
the
sort
same
of
tools.
expressing he wanted to do this dystopian world where, you know, Big Brother's watching.
Yes.
So we did a really nice sort of layering effect, and then graffitiing it, got his friends to graffiti it as well. And then he used real screws to make the standoff with just like a piece of dowel behind. And then the next one, the student made this really beautiful sort of, she wanted it to be reminiscent of like a traditional cameo.
Yeah.
So it was really very simple looking.
Beautiful. I love the choice too here to use mirror in the sort of like in the eye, because you will see yourself being watched in a way. It has this sort of cool, oh, that's really cool. And then of course, I mean, graphic novels gets the beautiful bright bombastic treatment that it I
love it.
Oh, okay. So
this is like another thing that we've done. We made badges and fees for one of the photo contests that we have every year. So I'm going to do that but different color scheme. So really great to be able to take, certificate, but also give them these like commemorative items as well, and have them all made in house.
That's awesome. I should say too, for any educators who do
for the grade 12.
No, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say we were able to give the artists, little badges, so when they're walking around their show, people know who the artists are, and it's sort of like an invitation to say, come and talk to me about my work.
Yeah, 100%. And I hope this as another way of sort of recognizing these students who've done this incredible stuff.
So yes, this is another personal project. One of the students wanted to make a chassis for his. So he designed that, and we cut it out in really thin plywood, and he then just used regular paint, acrylic paint to paint it, and went straight ahead. Rapid prototyping, if something didn't work, he could come back, refine his design. The projects that we do are a lot of fine art projects. We do a lot of design projects. The projects that we've done with design have been things like creating board games, and then they've created the board game with the laser, with engraving, and then they've created the pieces with 3D prints, things like that, using all of the different things together. There's just another example of like trying to create sort of dimensionality with flat substrates.
Oh, I love this. This necklace piece is one of my favorites. Oh, that's so cool.
It's fun. I'm actually going to do a camp over summer just based on jewelry, because
really?
It's a nice way for people to start out into using laser for on small projects, but get to use a lot of different techniques.
Absolutely. We haven't been able to do it in recent years, but we used to do a contest with university students who were studying fashion or jewelry design, where they would get to come down and make designs on the laser here. Just sort of like sort of a simplified version of the stuff that your students would. And I think it's one of the greatest initiatives, because some of the coolest projects that we have here in our showroom to show off are some of the ones that were created by students, multi-dimensional rings that you can assemble yourself and things. And it's just jewelry, I think, is a great application of the laser that's maybe underserved a little bit. There are some incredibly talented people that if
you can basically scrap well.
You can build an entire
box. It's amazing.
Yeah, forgive me, I'm overexcited. I wanted to
I'll just quickly shoot through this. Just one of the reasons why, I've always got the laser in the back of my mind, and even when I'm demonstrating, I always demonstrate a whole range of different traditional techniques with art. And so, we're doing dyeing with Procyon dyes, or indigo, or reverse dyeing with bleach. And I'm showing people a shibori dyeing technique, just like these technique of binding materials and clamping them to create patterns. And so I'm thinking, well, normally you'd have a circle or a square, but why can't we have a heart or a star or like, you know, SpongeBob, whatever you want, you know, you can create something super quickly on the laser, try it out, see if it works. You know, it's one of those things where it's just give like an extra dimension to what you're doing, really.
The classical artist shapes.
So that's the
circle,
design process there.
Heart, square, and SpongeBob. That's so cool. Oh wow, it really is beautiful, the result too.
And, it's all about folding and binding. So really, you know, there's lots of different ways that you can experiment with those types of things. This is a project that I did actually at home, but it was able to, I'm able to then offer this to the students who are interested in doing traditional analog photography. There's a bit of a photo nerd, and we have a darkroom at home, and we basically got the secondhand enlarger, but we didn't have any of the negative carriers. So of course you can just make one, you know, create something that will basically make this other thing work. So it's not just creating for creating's sake, but it's actually just facilitating creation. So these are negative carriers, which means that they hold specific types of formats of negatives, and then you can then use that to make the enlarger work. So yeah, there's just so many different ways. And for this one, I used a satin acrylic because it didn't have that reflective surface that would interfere with the way that the light was projected through the negative. So that was really nice.
I think it's great. I mean, it just goes to show too, I mean, the difference between, like you say, the creating for creating's sake is obviously perfectly acceptable. We fully thumbs up to that. But then also being able to create something that is like to solve a problem with the laser, you know, it's equally capable on both fronts. I wanted to ask, you know, if there were other sort of instructors who got a chance to see this presentation either now or like in the future, if we have it up on our, oh my gosh, there's so many things I wanted to, hold on. I wanted to come back to a previous slide. Instructors who ever get to see this presentation either now or in the, oh, I'm sorry, say again?
Mm-hmm. Available, sure.
Well, I mean, 100%. I would send them your way if it's all right. I wanted to ask you though, I think it's important that we touch off just quickly here as we're getting towards the end of the hour. You know, what is the role? You mentioned that you are the one who presses the button when the laser runs. You know, what is the role, would you say, of sort of safety with a tool like this when sort of working with students? You know, how big of a role does that play? And, you know, do you have any sort of tips for, because it is one of the questions, obviously, and rightly so, that comes up with schools who are considering, you know, looking at a laser is how can we be sure that it is safe for students? And so I'm sure it's something that was asked of you when you sort of talked about adding a laser, and you know, how did you approach that very important question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, there are a number of things, even in the studio right now, like I mentioned earlier, the Intaglio print press, you can crush your fingers in that, you know, the kiln, very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. There's so many different things like that, but that's why we have trained people who are able to operate that machinery, but the students are not divorced from the process. They're brought into the process up to the point where the machine is sort of turned on. So they see how to create something. They are shown how to, you know, prepare their files, and then they're shown the thing in, you know, working well. I mean, the nice thing about the laser is, you know, you can bring people in and they can see their things being cut. They can see things being engraved in front of their eyes. If you do the same thing with the 3D printers, you know, it's exciting for about 2 minutes because your thing is going to take about 4 hours to print probably. Mm-hmm. But I mean, people are so interested in the process, they're so interested by it, and then they see the results as well. So, you know, as long as you have someone who's trained, you know, laser safety officer and somebody who is operating this stuff, you know, I'm teaching the teachers how to use things. I'm teaching the students how to use things. But it's really about, showing them and demonstrating, the materials and the opportunity that's there for this medium. It's one in our huge range of tools that we have at our disposal.
You'll have to.
Presentation is about we've used it.
And if it's okay with you, certainly, perhaps this is something that I will. I'll ask you off air. I was just going to say we hopefully we'll be able to share some or all of these images with through a link perhaps on the video or because there's so much great stuff here. I feel as though I rushed through and I still wasn't able to get to all the stuff I wanted to show off. I think first and foremost I think we would be remiss not to give a shout out to the school. Can you tell us a little bit about Mulgrave? I know it's in British Columbia, but sort of where it is and what would be the sort of age range?
We're on Cypress Mountain, and it's an IB school, so International Baccalaureate Continuum School. So that means we are a huge campus which has PK3, which is like basically 2 years before kindergarten, all the way up grade 12. And my son goes here.
Cool.
And that's how I actually got the school. And really, it's the way that we instruct the students is there's a lot of stuff that, where they learn how to learn, they learn how to be self-directed, they learn how to, express themselves and to really sort of like follow the IB principles, which is to do with risk taking, it's to do with being kind, it's to do with like being responsible and being a global citizen basically. So yeah,
that's wonderful.
It's a marvelous place to work. I have to give a shout out to our leadership team, who I feel are pretty visionary because they do support the arts so much. So I'm so happy to work somewhere that has those values basically.
I'm very glad to hear it. I'm glad you work there too, because you've done us a service this morning, I think, in coming through to show us this stuff. A huge thank you to you. I really appreciate it. I won't ask you to put your email out there on the internet necessarily, but if anybody would like to get a hold of Liza, if you're a teacher or you're curious to learn more, you can always email us at youtube@troteclaser.ca, and we will pass your email along to her. That's not a problem at all. I think we would definitely do well to sort of I love seeing stuff like this. I know I've said it 100 times, but I get so inspired by seeing presentations like this. I think it's unreal.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think that will probably do it for today. Oh, it's a shame that he wasn't able to join us again, but we'll listen. We'll get him back on. We'll have to have you again then so that you can talk with James. I do really quickly, before we go, forgive me for some quick housekeeping. I should answer some quick questions here in the chat. Sam, do I have a solution for the smell of lasered leather? If it's real leather, I'm afraid not. I don't. I know that lasered leather tends to be it's a powerful, you'll know what's happening. I don't, the laser. Yeah, it's one you won't forget quickly. I will say the laser leather that we have is a PU plastic, so it
doesn't last. Keep it down. Don't open the lid until give it a chance to ventilate for a bit before you lid.
That's good advice. As much of a chance as you can give it, as long as possible. I think the thing to mention too is that the laser leather that we're introducing, because it's a plastic, really at the end of the day, it looks and feels just like real leather. If you want samples at all, be sure to reach out to your consumables rep. We can get you samples of it for free. That's no problem. But it doesn't have any smell. It's just it smells like a lamecoid would. And Doug mentions about getting a sample set of each sheet or each of the colors. There are 6 different colors. We're waiting on the 6th color to show up. And once it does, we're going to do exactly that. So if Liza, if you or anybody else is interested in getting some samples, I hope you'll reach out and we'll be happy to send those to you. I hope you guys like laser leather. Definitely check it out. I just want you guys to, I hope you have, I just want to give you all the fun toys to put in the laser. It makes me so happy that the big green plastic squares that I send out turn into cool stuff like this. Okay, I think that is going to be the end for this week. Again, a huge thank you to Liza. I'm sorry that our internet is a little perhaps choppy, but I hope we'll get a chance to have you back. I mean, you're invited anytime, of course. Again, if you want to learn more about either about the school, like about Mulgrave, or about Lisa's work, or anything like that, you're more than welcome to reach out to us here, YouTube at troteclaser.ca, and we will do our best to pass along that correspondence to her. You are clearly a very talented artist, and I think also a very talented educator. I think you have a knack for this, so I hope we'll get to have you back in the future.
Yeah, this type of stuff.
I'm glad.
An evangelist, I have to say.
We need more of them.
Okay.
Take care, everyone.